All right, looks like we are live. Let me check if we are, because I'm always freaking out about the tech. Like, the worst thing about streaming is when the tech fails.
Yeah.
Right, let's see. And we should be able to see the chat somewhere. Um,
Yes. Yeah. And the restream, I think I should be able to,
yeah,
and also the private chat with you here.
all
Yeah.
right. Yes. Nice. So, welcome everyone. Starting soon though. Okay, now it works. All right, perfect. Perfect. Welcome everyone. We have here Mohit as a guest and me as a speaker, as an organizer. Welcome Mohit.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to see, all of the work that you are doing, and also everybody. I hang out a lot on LinkedIn, and I see a lot of activity these days. So which is really good and exciting. So thanks for your time.
Awesome. And Angel Zaika writes, "Hello guys. So if you watch it, just write a plus into the comments so that we see that you're here and we interact a little bit with you." And what we're gonna be speaking today about is Agentforce. Agentforce, Agentforce. It's everywhere, right? Salesforce is making a lot of noise with Agentforce. But what I'm the most interested in as a developer, as someone who is working with Salesforce every day, basically, what's in Agentforce for me? Because you see in a lot of Agentforce things is that they advertise it for the companies, which is fair, right? Salesforce is B2B. So here today we're going to be speaking about Agentforce for developers and what's in it for us. So Victor writes, "Good afternoon." All right, so maybe to get started, uh,
Yeah.
tell for the people like what's your touch with the like what's your role at Salesforce with the Agentforce.
Yeah, hey everyone. So, I think you distinguished very well, like agent force for developers and then the general agent force, right? The general agent force technology. I must say though that, both of these technology have relevance to the developers. But first I'll introduce as you asked me. So I'm Mohit. I'm a developer advocate here at Salesforce. And what I do is try to bridge our community with our product team and the research teams who are building all of these products, and your developers who are actually going to use these products to build end user agents and applications, right? So I bridge both of them. And how do I do that is through advocacy by writing content, specifically if I want information from Salesforce to flow to all of your developers. I write content, show videos about these products, um, you know create use cases so it sparks ideas for all of you. And then I also play the devil's advocate, I must say, for Salesforce teams, because I hear all the feedback from you, mostly negative, positive, whatever, right? So I take that feedback back into our product teams and say, hey, this is what developers are telling us about these products. This is what they would like to, this is their feedback on how they want to improvise. So you can think me as bridge. Most importantly, think me as a member of the community, because I learn everything from the social media, and by being hands on, just like all of you, just like all of you, I spend my entire day, I must say, writing code, like writing Apex and LWC, just like how all of you are building, right? At the same time, I also get to play a little bit about all the new features though, right? Like that some of you are now exploring, right? So we get all these features, and I try to play with them and see what it has for developers, and a lot of fun stuff here, for sure.
Awesome. From the feature standpoint, I think many months ago when the Agent Force, like it was called Einstein Copilot, when it
Yes.
just came out, it was crazy because I didn't really like it, and I wrote to post that it's not really on the level of most copilots. But
Yes.
then something
Yes.
crazy happened. Like
Yes.
the team that was
Dreamforce.
responsible for that catched
Yes.
up so much.
Yes.
How like how? Do you see
Yeah.
the internal working? Like what's the secret sauce?
Yeah. So look, Salesforce, as you know, of course, we have great engineering team, because there's so many customers that we serve to, right? Great product and the research team. It's just about like where those priorities are gonna be, right? And I think it is very important for us to understand developers in that context, right? Definitely developers are one of the priorities for Salesforce, I can assure you that, what I've seen, right? So um, when you wrote that post around, like, hey, this agent force, just does bare minimum at that point, Einstein, right? Of course, we had a lot of these technology to make it happen, as you see today, right? We had all the technology. It's just a matter of, like, focusing and making sure that we deliver, right? So we have these large language models. I mean, code gen, if you go to Hugging Face, anybody can go to Hugging Face and find our models. Code gen, XGen, these are like definitely one of the biggest research areas, like how to use AI to help developers write code, right? But these are like generic models, as you know, like just like other models out there, right? And just to help you everyone understand, I know this is like very new concept, like these machine learning and large language models. Of course, you can little bit forget about machine learning, like in general, right, and focus only on that specific large language model, because that's what is driving all the hype and driving all these concepts of agents that I think everyone is working these days, not just Salesforce, but every company is trying to build some sort of agent, right, and trying to get ahead of that race, right? So the technology here is very simple to understand. Actually, it's not rocket science, okay? So this large language models, right, they are trained on large massive volumes of data, right? And these have become like commodities. You can see them, like, you can see large language models on Hugging Face. Like, if you go to Hugging Face, uh, I don't recall like how many models they have, probably more than 1,000 at this point, or even more than that, right?
Yeah.
So Salesforce has this code gen model, which obviously is one of the models that has a lot of potential for coding, right? But it's not just about these LLMs. Actually, LLMs is one part of the technology, but you need a lot of things, like how do you surface the request from the user, right? When you write a query and send it to the model, that technology, you need like inference. Inference is very easy to understand. It's like, you can think of it like, how do you take the request and respond, right, in simple terms, like your APIs probably, right? So you need to run all these infrastructure. It's not just about these models, right? You need to fine tune this model. Like, for example, we take these base models and then fine tune it for Apex use cases and LWC and R. So we had to do that, and then surface it, figure out like the cost for it, and how many requests are going to come, how do we scale it, right? So there's a whole lot of infrastructure that goes behind this. So of course we needed that, and then also we needed to improve that application layer too. Like, how do you take these prompts, right, and give you features that you would want, like conversational capabilities. RAG is another thing that we don't use a lot of RAG terms, but some RAG is already there, and it's going to go better and better with more RAG capabilities. Do you know, Igor, what is RAG and stuff?
Yeah, I know this. This was actually one of my concerns when I started with this, is that um I realized that it doesn't use the data model that you have, basically. And that was like
Mm.
one of the big points, that it does not know what is the data model. But now it's better, right? Now you
Mhm.
fixed it mostly, but still it's still on the roadmap, right, to fix it completely.
Yeah. I mean, RAG is like evolving feature, right? So really, yeah, I think that is one of the features I'm really excited that we have now, is like, you can write a prompt and you can be very generic in that prompt. Like, you don't have to specify your data model. And by the way, like, in prompting, if you would have said this is my field, this is my object, it would have still worked. But
Yeah.
you, as a developer, you don't want to like get into that experience. That's like prior AI experience, right? Where you have
Yes.
your developer console, you look at all the fields, you copy paste into your editor, and then build your query and your logic, etc. So yeah, I think that is powered by RAG again. So what we do, RAG and prompting, basically, I mean, we prompt for a lot of things. So the way today it works is, one of the things we ask you to do is refresh schema. So I don't know if you know about this. Like, you have to do Command Shift P, and then there is this SFDX, refresh entity definitions. So some might have turned that off in their IDE because it does take some time. But really the idea is you sync that, like once you execute that, we take all the metadata that you have from your IDE itself. Again, we first take it from your org into the IDE, and then we somehow use that as a means to collect everything into the prompting. And then we know that, okay, this is the objects, these are the fields that are there. So we could be like really particular about, okay, this, when somebody asks a query, right, you're sure, okay, this object, these fields I need to pull in. So based on the semantic meaning, we understand these many fields, etc. But that's just one part of it. I would say, like, it's growing. Like, you cannot imagine the things you can do with RAG. So so one of the capabilities that we don't have, and our competitors have, is uh, multiple files, being able to look at, like, today you can look at multiple files if you open them, right? But like features around, okay, it just understands your whole code base, like it just knows your code base to begin with. And the way the companies do it is again through RAG, where what they do is like they create embedding vectors from your code, actual code, like created into numericals or vectors, and they store somewhere in the database, right? And then when you issue the query, they'll look for the similarity search and then augment with that prompt and send it to the large language model and then get the results, right? But for us as a company, I think we want to get to all those things, but we want to make sure we do it very safely,
Hmm.
like not leaking any code into the model. Because in our case, right, a lot of times, like even test classes can have actual emails. I don't know how many developers write that, but that is very common to see. Is like you have a test class and you're creating a user where you just put an actual email, and imagine if that email goes to a large language model. Somehow the large language model knows that email, and potentially there is some risk. Maybe someone asks something related or trying to hack things out of that large language model. Like, for example, chat gpt, right? They give the model, but everyone has access to the model, like entire internet, right? So you can, like, start prompting, and maybe you get the data. Right? So we need to be
Yeah.
careful about that, and I think that is the advantage. So that is our advantage, is security. We are a security driven company, like first security. Forget about the features and stuff. Okay, we want to get to the features, but make sure that it's secure, like all of your code base is truly secure.
So I want to ask a little bit more on that because I like I see how people, when we speak about Agentforce for developers, the people kind of go through, like a couple of stages of disbelief or something like this. So the first one is that people say, "Oh, it's not that great," sometimes, right? And
Yeah.
then this is not true already. I think this is like we already like fought this. I think that at this point it's quite on par with the existing copilots, because when you think about copilots, right, you look at the leading like cursor, for example, or GitHub Copilot. But then the big also benefit of the Agentforce for developers is it's free,
Mm.
and it's like tailored to the Salesforce, right? So I
Yeah.
think that we are past this stage. And another like immediately the second thing that people tell me is that, okay, but then is it gonna be used to train all the, like, what kind of code are you using? Like if I'm writing the code, basically, is it gonna be used then to train the other model? So you say it's not used, right? You're using some kind of
No.
like internal code stuff.
Yes, not, yeah, I mean, internal code, of course. We have people who write, whose job is that, like,
Mm,
write prompts and write code.
mhm.
Skilled apex developers, right? So of course, like, write code, write that, and then use that to, like, fine tune our models. And it's gonna get better and better. I know there are metrics around like LWCs and stuff that we think we are just getting started on that. Like, I can easily say that if you use other models like Claude, for example, it's way ahead in terms of LWC code. Because of course LWC, if you think about it, it's HTML, JavaScript,
Yeah.
CSS, and that knowledge on the internet is lot than what we could have here, right? But we are improving on that, like trying to understand, okay, what are these, some of these things that we need to fill in gaps for, and those are all in the roadmap. As you saw, product manager Ananya, like yesterday, she was talking about, so yesterday we had a AMA Ask Me Anything, and Ananya kind of explained the roadmap, right? And I highly recommend, it's on our developers channel, to go look at it. at least the first 15 minutes, right? Of course, you are free to watch everything there, but first 15 minutes, she clearly says the roadmap items. So one of them is that LWC, right? And I think it's opening up a lot more things, in my opinion. Like, I think we are getting started with Apex and LWC, but you see, there is a lot more things here. Like, how do we think about the overall working of applications with
Yes.
Salesforce? I think that Salesforce is different, right? I mean, you have to click and point for a lot of things, like these objects you create by hand, like clicking. So there's an opportunity for that, and I think somewhere in the roadmap is there, like you should be able to generate objects, and schemas and things like that. um and again, we have to reimagine. I think this is disruption period, right?
Mhm.
Reimagine the experience with AI. Okay, if AI is going to be the one that's going to be assisting all of us doing our jobs, right? And if Salesforce development is one of the jobs, right, how do we make it easier for people to build? And it's going to be constant. I mean, 20 years already Salesforce spent time thinking on it. Maybe another few years, right? So as the things evolve, these things evolve. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I think would be a big differentiator personally for me is that I need to spend so much time if I use like Claude or ChatGPT. I need to spend so much time to explain the specifics of Salesforce, right? That you
Yes.
cannot do that, you cannot do this. And if Salesforce is able to like just just pre-train the model that understands those specifics, I think that's going to be insanely powerful. Um,
Good
but
feedback.
speaking of this, I want to do a little bit of engagement with the chat, and I want everyone who is watching to write plus or minus in the chat. If plus, if you used Agentforce or if you tried it,
Yeah.
Agentforce for developers, not the one, and minus if you didn't, because what I want to kind of achieve with this with this with this stream is that we take a little bit of fear behind the agent force for developers, because I know
Mhm.
that developers are them so skeptical about everything.
Yes.
So it takes a lot of things. um speaking of this, so you wanted to show a little bit of the agent force itself, and I think it's
Yeah.
a part of taking minus. I see minus, someone writes minus, Fabian
Nice.
writes minus. Okay, so this is, we still have a lot of work to do there. I think part of taking that fear out is actually see it in action. So
Yeah.
maybe you could show us some
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Definitely. Let me actually get my screen up here, so we can actually see some of these things in action. And I really want to, keep it live. Actually, I mean, if you try this today, I'm not using any future, like forward-looking product or anything like that. Hopefully, you can see my screen.
I actually, let's see. I don't think so. Wait, it's
I
just me. Maybe
Okay.
you need to stop
Okay, let me
and
stop
start again.
sharing. Okay, that's weird. Okay, screen share. All right, window, entire screen one. Okay, that's what I want, screen one. It does show me in the background though. That There you go.
Yes.
There you go.
No.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
Nice.
Yeah, so again, anybody can look at this extension, like get this from the extensions place. You look for Agentforce for developers and install it. That's about it. And then you'll have this agent icon here. And it's interesting, we renamed it. Everybody would have, who would have used, in a few months back, right? You would have known this extension as Einstein for developers. Uh, Naming is one of the things that we do here to stay relevant at Salesforce. But I think this is a good thing to name it to Agent Force or Agent Force for developers, because that's where we want to. Like, we want this to be an agent, right? Agent. We want this to be agentic, and we'll come up talk more about what do we mean by agentic, right? So we want this to be agentic. That means, automating a lot of things that you manually do today, through AI, basically, through generative AI and our models, right? So here you'll see Agentforce. I've installed it. And what I was saying was, before you kind of use this, what is going to make a real difference is making sure you refresh your S object definitions. So once you do that S object definitions, What it will do is it will be able to read all your like the metadata elements from your org. I think there is this thing where you get all the all the object names at least, and I think there is a metadata type JSON too, where it knows all the metadata, of course, that your org has. So there are some hidden files in
So,
here,
sorry. So, quick clarification. So it doesn't really download the metadata itself, right? It downloads the definitions of them,
Yes,
basically.
it's only definitions. Yeah, that's a great
That's
point. It
nice.
doesn't download the metadata fully. Like it will download only the definitions, like your object names, your field names, that you have in your org, right? But that schema dot definitions, right? I think we store somewhere as metadata type JSON. This is all metadata. I think this is for metadata. I don't think this is relevant, but I think custom object dot JSON. This is where we download all the object, at least the objects that are there. And then somewhere in here, I'm pretty sure we also download so this one, typings, right? So in typings, you can actually go look at each of these typings where it has all the field names. You see, my account has these many standard fields. I'm pretty sure there are other custom fields too in my org that will come there. So for example, I think one of our objects here is booking, so you can see, so it has all the things, so that way it knows, okay, this is a custom object, these are the fields, etc. um, and now I can, so this is what we call it as dev assistant, actually. So when you click on this, and I often use this dev assistant, so one of the things that you should always remember is that file, and then anything that you have opened in your editor, right, does matter actually for your prompts. That is first thing to understand here. It's pretty simple. Like if I do a prompt and I have a file open here, it'll probably give me a different response than if I don't have anything, you know so I generally don't have anything when I'm like creating something from the scratch. Like let's say I say, write a class experience controller. Let's say, I'm working on this, by the way, this app that I'm writing, right, working on, this is Coral Cloud app, which is one of our sample apps, actually, that's there on the GitHub. I just downloaded the source code for that for this demo. So now I'm going to be like, okay, write a class experience controller, right? Write a method, for example, that gives experience detail by ID, right? By experience ID, we can say. So it's very generic, right? The prompt, again, I'm only telling, I have spell here, and spell shouldn't matter too, but just in case. So simple thing, right? So if I execute, you will see that it's actually thinking, right? But if you look at what it generates now, it knew the parameter, right? It knew it has to filter by the parameter, right?
Mhm.
Also the method name, you see the method name here, it knew that it get experience detail. Did I call the method name? No, I just said write a method. That's nice to be able to give a good method name, or predict it, and then use the experience ID, and then it just comes up, and here it is, right? It just gives me, right, and I can copy this, or wherever my cursor is, like this is where your cursor is. Like if you have your cursor or a file, you can just push it to that specific cursor point using this icon here, and then I can iterate. Previously the problem was it was generating, it was not, you are not able to iterate it, right? Like example here, I'm
Yes.
gonna say, and that's a big feature, by the way, that's a big feature of AI, to be able to, like, if even if it hallucinates or comes with some sort of response, this is the feature of AI, to be able to tell, hey, you made this error, go fix it, right? So for example here, right, I'm writing this for an LWC component. Let's see what it does, right? Typically I would go and, of course, good developers, they know at aura enabled, and that's it, right? But let's imagine that, I'm a very newbie, and oh, there you go, it writes the LWC2. That was not something I was expecting, but let's see where it goes to. So there you go, it just writes some LWC2 for me, which is good, but I think we hit the limit, right?
You had the
So let's
limit.
make it
Yeah.
a little more clear. But it's good that it generated it though. I like it. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, make sure that the Apex controller
It depends a lot on the prompt itself, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like
of course. Yeah,
if you also say to developer, like the developer itself might misunderstand what exactly you mean. So guess the same goes for AI.
yeah, yeah, yeah. For LWC, let's see what it does now. It still goes.
Still goes
So
for LWC. This
goes for
is
it.
yeah, this is always like this with the demo. I think one of the interesting things actually is like how much you can
Let me.
steer the AI, right?
Yeah, yeah. We
Let's see
can,
if that
and that's the power, right? So we can say only modify the Apex class for me.
yeah.
We can say
But
like,
all of this is like
and
all
this
of
is
this
just.
is solvable with the time, right?
Yes, and the thing is, look, this is the part. This is something that we need to be, um, we need to be like, I would say, this is something that we are all experimenting at this point. It's like, it's part of the natural workflow here. That okay, there will be things that AI is not going to be 100%, right? It's like my vacuum cleaner. It doesn't do 100%, right? But I keep telling my wife that okay, look, even if it does 80%, I'll take care of 20% for you, or even if it does like 40%. um by the way, my wife is like, still like, she's like really particular about that stuff though. So she's like, no, I am confident in my ability, right? So I keep telling, okay, even for developers that's the same thing, right? But it's like, it's matter of, again, time, and what you want to do, where you want to do, how do you want to think, right? Like in this case, I'll probably, okay, see a couple of times. Okay, only modify the do not write LWC. Let's see what it does now, right? And other thing, hopefully it doesn't. There you go.
Here we go. It's
That's it.
stuck with the LWC.
Yeah, and I think why it is kind of stuck here, and that is also very important to understand, is like, why is it like really, like, why is it stuck with this LWC thing, right? Like, why is, of course I'm going to go back here and talk to my research teams here a bit. But really what is important to understand is, look, these LLM have context. Okay, they have context, meaning how much they can actually take, okay, into their prompts too, right? And in this case, this whole conversation is also part of the same prompt, okay, that is going there. Now that has a limitation, okay. Some models, right, for example Gemini has 2 million context, so if we were doing this on Gemini, probably, probably it would have been better, right? It would have understood that okay, this model is not able to, because the moment it generated that LWC for me, right, it basically has more details now that it can understand. And that is what people, when people say context window, right, that is what they meant, right? And the fix for this is very simple. All we need is like, have AI to forget about this, forget about this thing. And the first thing I would have done, so this is a good lesson for me too, and also for everyone. That's why I love live stream, is like, you make mistakes with the actual product, and then you teach people like, okay, what is the thing, right?
Agree.
So
It's very real.
yeah, very real, right? So what I would have done though is, when you're working, right, make sure you store the actual code somewhere, right? Like for example, let me just create a file here, create an Apex class, let's call it and we should have done it, we should have agent do it for us, that is my hope, at some point the agent should do this for me, kind of. um Agent should be able to create classes right?
Yes.
I just tell it, right? So let's say I have this class now, right? Now we say, okay, forget about all of these, right? All of the thing that happened, by the way, it's class. Just let me.
Yeah, now you have two classes.
Yes, we only need the classes.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. And let me just. Okay, so here it is, right? So here this is, and of course we can use prettier, if I had prettier to prettify a little bit of these, right? But
Mhm.
now let's say I save it, right? And now I go here and say, reference this active editor entire file, right? Make this class so that uh, you know it works with an LWC. Let's see what it does now.
And is now the class automatically included, or do you have like to highlight it or somehow explain to it?
No, we don't need to explain actually, and it's going crazy here, crazy, really crazy with the stuff. It shouldn't actually. Okay, let's do this. This might be a bug that I have to like, let's reload this, right?
Yeah,
This is the
when I was testing it a couple of days ago, it was it was following quite well the
no. So
most of things.
LWC, I brought in LWC. You see, we are also working on LWC experience, right? So probably this might not be a good use case at this point, because again, we want to make it LWC compatible too, right? It's
Mhm.
good that it is generating, right? Make this class so I can use within my LWC. Let's try a different prompt, see if it works before I kind of give it up.
And I think we're
There
like
you go. There you go.
nice,
There
our
it is.
enabled cacheable
Yep.
true. And this is actually this is super interesting that we have it because I think it highlights like one of the biggest problems with current LLMs, and it doesn't matter is it Salesforce, is it any other LLM, is
It
that
doesn't matter.
sometimes it takes more time for you to actually explain what you want,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Versus you just writing immediately. And that
Yes.
happens also because you often with other LLMs, you have to explain the context of Salesforce itself, right?
Yes, very very good point. And again, as I said, probably if I was developing this, I would have been like, okay, one time I see, it's not doing it, I would have straight away gone and put that aura enabled and moved on. Again, don't be resistive. Like, here I wanted to be resistive because I wanted to show that it actually, it will work, provided I do some things. And one of the things I did was reload it, so it loses all the context, and this was a good explanation of context window you would never get, I guess, on the internet. Like, what is this context window, right? You saw the problem that the context window created. So I just like, wiped out everything from the memory, right? And then said, hey, now tell me, right? And you see it actually used the reference. As you can see, it says one reference, it used the reference of this class. And I was able to say, make this class so I can use this within my LWC. You see, the other thing that I said was this, right? Make this class so it understand what is that this, when I had this apex class here.
Absolutely. And this is so magical. Like I know sometimes I'm freaking out so much because you basically you say there's so much context behind it, right? Like
Yeah.
that you don't really say, but like you say make this class so that I can use it within LWC. It's very like if you are even if you're a junior developer or if you're only starting out with Apex, you might not even understand what it means. But this AI it can understand. It's
Yes.
magical.
Yeah, magical, but at the same time I would say, if you are a learner and stuff, of course understand everything, that's there. One of the things I often use here is this explain command. That's really useful. If you already have like, a class or something, it can really explain well, like, okay, what is going behind the scene, um, and this is very useful, especially when you are far into a code, right? I mean, you as a human, right, like us, like when I'm looking at this class, right? Okay, I have been a developer for some time, so I know what's going on with this class, right? But sometimes, the abstraction, because of a lot of abstractions and stuff, you really don't know what's happening, right? And the explain command is really a nice handy tool here that I love. So I'm like, okay, explain this for me, and then it goes here and explains like what this is all about, so that's nice.
And
I
then
can
it
read.
automatically takes the current file, right, where you're
Yes.
looking at.
Yeah, it automatically does take the file, right? Yeah, correct. You see, it did actually. I opened that. It says that it used this class for the reference.
Perfect.
Yeah, and the other thing is, of course, like writing tests, right? Like this controller, right? This controller that I have, right? Um, like if I had to write test classes, I mean, test classes are my, very important thing. But one of the things that I definitely don't enjoy as a developer, it's a lot monotonous stuff, right? But you can see it, it pretty much came back with something, good enough, and I can iterate over it, write a method to create a test data to, right? And it should generate some test data for me here.
So Tsenko writes in the chat, useful scenario for old code or org you see for the first time. Explain for me simple words and
Yeah,
what it does. Yep.
yeah, yeah. And you see, it wrought this whole thing, like typing would have seriously taken me time. I'm pretty sure it's for same for you too. Right? Unless
Yeah.
you are like a magic typer or something, right? And also think about, like, this also eliminates a lot of thinking that I have to do. Okay, what would be the description? What would be the picture URL? I mean, there's some thinking involved here that you do as a developer, and these are monotonous stuff. You need to be more thinking around more creative stuff, and you need to be understanding more things. Like, for example, I want to now spend a lot of time reading how these LLMs work, instead of writing probably this test code. That's what I wish, right? But I still have to write the test code, because of my job or what or whatnot, right? So this really helps me. I'm like, okay, I'll probably write some things and see, it saves me some time. Maybe I can use that time for something else.
Absolutely. Yeah. It drains a lot, like, small tasks. They
Yeah.
drain you like during the day. And I think I think once people actually start using something like this, it's very hard to go back. Like I've been using
Yeah.
since the first Copilot took off. I've been
Yeah.
using it, and whenever I go back without Copilot, I feel like I'm literally coding in like Notepad.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to show was this inline code completion, and I know a lot of developers actually don't like it, and you can always switch off these features, right? But let's say I had something like, get experiences, by date, and I give some parameter, let's say date, uh, let's say start date or something like that. So it should be intelligent enough to go and predict like what's going on behind the scenes. I think we don't need this, right? But you see, it actually goes, does something, and sometimes you need that. Sometimes this is like, of course, it's taking an guess of, okay, maybe I need to do something like this. It's taken an actual guess of what you're thinking, basically. um, you might not be doing that, it's okay, and you can reject it, right? But the fact that it's trying to guess, right, just by the method name, is an idea that I think can save some time, if that's what you want. Like, sometimes you want that, sometimes you want part of it, sometimes you want maybe a tiny bit of it. So it's saving time. And again, it's up to your preference. Actually, I got used to it, so I keep it. But a lot of developers prefer to switch it, and you can switch it off too. There are settings there that we provide. uh, but one thing that is really important that I wanted everyone to understand is the model that we use to generate things here versus inline is totally two different models. And this is very
Ah,
important. Yes, two
that's
different
interesting.
models. Yes. So this one, we call it as Xcode Gen. It's a heavy model. And again, we have large language models, right? They give you a lot of things, like context window is one of them. Other thing is um, the amount of memory they have, and the knowledge that they have. Smaller models, they are good for precise tasks. They are also good for inference, which means as soon as you ask the query, they'll give you the response very fast. If you had to ask this model, it would have still like taken some time to think. So there is that balance that you have to make. You need knowledge, or you need faster inference to do something really quick. Okay, and every IDE implements in the same way. If you go cursor, they have cursor tab as the small model, behind the thing. I'm pretty sure Copilot might have something. But that's what we do. So this model is a very smaller version model. And again, all of these models, you can find it on here. Like, you can go to Hugging Face. Of course, we fine tune them for our use case here. But if you go to like Hugging Face, right? One of the things that I'm like really passionate about these days is like going and looking into models and seeing what they have, right? If you go to like just Salesforce, right, we have a lot of models and data sets there, right? And if you go look for, do we open source Xcode? I think it's called Xcode Gen. That's what we call. Maybe we don't publish that model, but I'm pretty sure we publish one of the bigger models for sure. Let's go look at all the Salesforce models here. So we go Salesforce. So you here
Xgen.
the XGen MM. You see.
And what can you do with this? Because I never used this Hugging Face. Like, what can you do if you just looking at like what it does?
That is awesome, right? What you can do is an field in itself, and we can have another live session, and I can show you a lot more cool stuff with it, right? You can do a lot of stuff with it, right? You can take this model and fine tune it with Hugging Face itself. I mean, there are other providers too, so you can bring in your own data set and fine tune, and that model
Mhm.
will definitely benchmark better than others, right? So and fine tuning is not enough. You need inference. You see, every model will have inference. What does inference mean? How do you serve that model so people can use it as API, right? And bring in their prompt basically. So all that infrastructure, I mean, Hugging Face provides, a lot of companies to provide too. But really what you can do here is you can take this model, understand what it does, see if you can inference it, like put it somewhere where you can, expose as an API. So again, there's not rocket science here. That's what I'm trying to say.
Does it?
Like, it- yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's super interesting because I've been working as a developer, but I never go into this type of things. So does it? It's not open source, right? It means that
Open
we.
source.
It is open
So,
source. Ah,
okay,
okay.
here's the fun stuff, right? Let's
Yes.
talk about this so that it's very clear for our viewers, right?
Yes.
Salesforce produces generic models which are very good at coding. Okay, generic models. They are probably better than your other models too. I don't want to get into like how much better, etc. It's all controversial these days with, because again, as a human, you will come back with a benchmark. Somebody will come back with some other benchmark, right? It all depends on what your benchmark is. So I don't want to get into that, but see, Salesforce produces these open source model which can take in your query. They're trained on a data set or the internet, just like any other models, and they can give you, uh, code completions, code suggestions, etc. And we publish that as open source. Meaning, if you are a developer, right? If you work with these models, if you want to build your own code generation, go ahead and build it. No harm in it. Open source. That's what open source is, right? But the
This is
amount of
awesome.
work that is required, yeah, amount of work that is required to bring this model to that state, whole engineering chapter, right? It's a lot of work. It's DIY. Probably at that point you're doing a lot of DIY and stuff. We don't recommend that, because you as a developer want to get value out of it, right? You want to make your businesses successful, right? That's is more important, right? But really the idea is we take these models, right? We manage it ourselves. We fine tune it for Apex and our programming languages, and then we call those models as XGen, smaller models, code gen, for Apex, etc. internally, right? And that is closed source, by the way. That work, right, is closed source of like what Apex is trained on, what data it's trained on. That is a closed source model, right? So that work, and then the inference, like how do we serve this RAG, which is retrieval augment generation, that all the stuff, right, is something that we do here at Salesforce so that this becomes usable thing in practical application. So usability of a model from like a raw state to actual usage, right, is a whole engineering step, right? And the companies are in the race to how can we make that easier. And I think Salesforce, right, I can easily say, and again it's opinionated, we are leading the charge on that because we make it so easy for developers and others too to use these things. Yeah.
This is awesome. No,
Yep.
this is very. I did not know this, and I bet like a lot of people didn't really know about this.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
this is very
Yeah, and
cool.
not only Salesforce. See, look, we have this France company Mixtral that I follow a lot, and you can see Mixtral
Yeah.
like publishes models every like now and then, and they have their Codastral for the coding. So they use Codastral. So you see Codastral. This is also another model for like um, coding, and you can see you can actually train them on one of these providers. You can use Nvidia or Amazon. You can train them, and then you can deploy on one of these clouds and then use it basically.
Awesome.
So don't think as a developer it's something like when you what I see people is these days, like the moment this large language model comes, they're like little like, okay, it's very hard technology, and yeah, of course, we don't recommend building the models. Definitely, that's like no question. Building a model is a lot of work, a lot of compute. I don't think as a developer I have the money, nor people will have it, right? But using them, right, like using it even in the raw state and making inferences, fine tuning them, building rack solutions on top of it, everybody as a developer should understand and should know that, in my opinion. And that is where this whole ecosystem is all about. So
This is very exciting. No, this is good because I think open source, this is a really good thing for developers to
yeah.
contribute to just like hang around and actually get experience, especially for people who are just starting out.
Yeah,
Uh,
and one of my favorite models these days I play with is
yeah,
Salesforce XLAM. Salesforce XLAM. Look at this model. This is where, and we publish all the paper, website, and the model too.
yeah.
So XLAM, what it does is basically function calling. Like if you give a task and if you say, okay, for this task I have this function, for this task I have this function, for this task. So think about, you have hundreds of Apex classes in your orgs, okay, and you can say this class does this class does this class does, as descriptions like natural.
Ah, what happened? What happened? Wait a second. So, is it my stream or is
Something got broke, right?
all right?
That's fine.
Okay,
That's fine.
people, write plus in the chat if you're still there. I see the stream. The stream should be working.
Yeah, yeah, and I am gonna share my camera again. Sorry, the screens again, so we can actually do this conversation and keep going.
All right.
Right. Yeah. So, one of the things I want to talk to you about, Igor, is, so I was telling, right? So you can have these. Let's say you have hundreds of classes, right, in your arc, and then you can provide descriptions for these classes, right? Now, the moment you say I want to do this, the AI is gonna say, okay, these are the classes you will need to accomplish this job, and that's what this XLAM model does it very well, better than, um, the OpenAI models too. And again, I don't want to get it like why better, etc. But yeah, like, so yeah, there are a lot of Salesforce models too. So if you are into that kind of work too, you should look at some of these stuff, open source that we do here.
This is cool. This is cool. I'm definitely gonna check it out, and I think that that's super exciting. We have a question from Tsenko to
Yeah.
you, Mohit. How
Yeah.
does Agentforce decides what to use in a particular scenario? I mean, Beige Apex versus Cursor, which is in beta, I still think. I don't really do understand the question. I mean,
Okay, so I understand, like, if you give a requirement, right? So what they're saying is, if you give a requirement like, hey, do this, right?
mhm.
And if you tell, hey, accomplish this requirement, how does it, how does it know it has to use batch apex or, apex cursors, for example, which is our feature, similar to batch apex? How does it make that design level decisions? And I would say that is that's a wrong use case for this dev assistance for sure. I would probably, not even like use chat gpt for that. And those are the tasks that I think, you should know as a human, like, okay, you should have knowledge around, like, okay, for this use cases these are batch, for this apex cursors, because cursors are very new, and none of the models are going to know about what is there in our documentation or help docs, right? So the way I think about this is, if you need something like that, that is a rag actually. So that, the way you can get that, in the way I saw, like, for example, if I had to do or ask AI that how are you how I should make that decision, is probably I would, take the help docs for batch apex, take the help docs for cursors, and put it into the chat, not this chat, of course, this coding model is not meant for that, but maybe general AI, and say, these are all the information, you have all the information, now this is my requirement, go ahead and show me sample code for this, or, the architectural decision, and maybe AI comes. But how much I trust it, I don't know. There might be hallucinations and stuff. I would better read those two documentation and use my thinking there to make those decisions. I think that is key to understand here, is like, you shouldn't treat AI as perfect solution. I mean, it might get perfect. Who knows, it might get perfect at some point, right? But at this point, I think it's really important to understand is like, use your human thinking, use your creativity, right? We shouldn't give away that in favor of AI. I think that is the key thing that I myself using all the I use all of the tools, by the way. I use all of the AI tools that comes out, in my day to day. Use all of them, play with them. What I have found is, if you become too much dependent on these tools and forget your own creativity or your own god gifted thing that you have, um, you will see that it will also have psychological effects, on you. And this is something that nobody is talking about, like the mental wellness thing that happens with these, right? um, so I think, be creative, right? But where you need to use AI is for lower level tasks. That's what I would use. Like, if I know exactly how I want my method to do, that's all. Instead of me going there and like coding every single bit, let AI generate that for me. you know let do this stuff for me, kind of. Yeah.
And I think that kind of leads to the question that a lot of people have. A lot of developers, they're kind of afraid that AI is going to replace them because they see that AI can generate code, right? What do you think about this?
Yeah, so this is a very good question. By this time, at least, and again, I'm not an expert in this area, to say, that whatever I'm saying is like 100% true, but I can give my opinion, right? As I told, I work as an advocate for Salesforce, but then I have my own opinions too here, right? And this is not Salesforce, don't treat this thing as Salesforce recommended thing or something like that. It is my opinion, right? My personal opinion, right? Working on all these tools and seeing, and people talk about AGI and stuff and whatnot, right? um my personal view on this is it going to boost your productivity? Yes, of course there's going to be productivity gain, whatever task it might be. Coding is one of them, as you know, we are relevant, right? Developers. Is it going to be to human level thinking? I don't know. Maybe, who knows? Maybe it does a lot of things better than us as humans, right? But what I think is we are more creative than AI, and we have more work to do than what AI can do at this point, at least. And we should be creative. We shouldn't give up that creativity thing that we have inbuilt. um and in terms of like developers, like, will developers be, LLMs are not going to be enough. Look, people were like, initially when this Copilot and thing happened, like, all know Chat GPT 2 years back, right? When this innovation, they're like, yes, this is doing everything, this is doing all the stuff that I'm doing, like I want, right? And then people are like, no, it's hallucinating. No, it's not doing things, right? And then people are like, okay, it's actually helping me in some sort, right? So there are lots of opinions, and I think it's all personalized. It just depends on how you use it. It's just like computer, right? Because the computers were invented, did it kill all the jobs, and are the computers doing everything for us? No, right? The answer is no, right? So similarly, I think LLMs are not going to be sufficient. There's going to be a lot of engineering layers on top of it to make things happen. And to automate, and there are rooms for automation here. If you've used Salesforce tools, we have these flows and whatnot, right? 20 years we've been doing that, right? It did automate certain tasks for people, and that's why people use Salesforce, right? What is that next level of automation, right? Automating that flow too, like how do we write these flows, how do we envision that? That's the next level of automation, right? So we'll keep automating certain stuff to make our lives easier, I guess. And in term in to do that also, in at least next 5-10 years, you need engineering. Okay, you have to skill up 100%. If you're not skilling up, if you don't understand what is RAG, if you don't know embeddings, how it works, we don't know these basics, I highly personally recommend that you go look at them, learn that. There are a lot of resources. Easy, I will tell you how I learned all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Nobody taught me, like nobody taught me, sat and taught me this is RAG. you know Go watch on YouTube, all the content is there on YouTube. Go watch, go follow some of these papers. Use AI to learn. I take these papers, put it into AI, I'm like, explain this. Because when I see these papers, I'm like blank, completely blank. I don't get it. Like, what are these researchers writing, you know, what are they telling, right? And I'm like, okay, but I need to understand this, to understand things better. And like context window was one of the things I was like, it's so hard to understand, right? And I had to play around with it. Like I had to go and create some context window, understand. And then I'm like, okay, now I get it, right? Similarly to the RAG, I had to understand how RAG works and why it's different. So I think, yes, skilling, yeah, you'll have to skill up, constantly skill up and understand things. But like, yeah, I mean, jobs will shift here and there. But I don't see like how we can get rid of all the engineering stuff and all the stuff. And by the time, if you're working in an organization, have used AI tools, I think you will be of the same opinion as me, that no, nothing, it's not going to replace at least in the
I
current state, it's not going to happen.
I agree. I totally agree. And I think the biggest danger here is like there are two different sides, right? The one side is when people completely dismissing, and I see it a lot with developers. Like I know so many developers who are completely like dismissing AI,
Yeah.
and it's dangerous because you might end up like a person who doesn't use Google in like
Yeah.
2004 whatever, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so that's kind of the same. So it's definitely important to just learn all these things. And maybe one of the last questions that I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of people in my audience, they are usually here for starting this, they start learning how to code. They're admins, they're
Yeah.
consultants, they're learning coding, they're junior developers. Some of them are
Yeah.
more like advanced developers, like Tsenko,
Yeah.
for example. um, what do you recommend, like your personal opinion, how beginners who only start with, like you had already a lot of experience with coding, right?
Yeah.
How like beginners should approach this whole AI thing? What's your
So,
recommendation?
this is very interesting question actually, and I keep thinking about it because I learned coding, back in, I would say back in 13 years now, so maybe 2011 or something like that. 13, 14 years now doing same coding. Right after college, I just started working with Salesforce. I mean, of course, I did a little bit of Java here and there, but Salesforce, primarily Salesforce. So here's what I think. When I started working, imagine I didn't have access to Google and IDE. Maybe I was, imagine I had Vim and TextPad to do the coding. How would it have been, the experience? Like, do all the code, deploy, get a bunch of errors, come back again, fix it, go deploy. The number of iterations you need to get things right is vast, right? And Google actually improved it because now, look, as a developer, right, you are not like, okay, you are creative. I don't say you're not creative. You are creative to some extent, but you are not the one who is inventing these compilers and this syntax. And you're not the one who are doing it, right? Of course, you are using Stack Exchange to copy things, Google to copy certain pieces of the code, putting together all the puzzles, like reading the docs, understanding, trying out, right? That's what you're doing as a developer. That's your job as a developer, right? um, that got simplified with Google because now I can Google stuff. I can go into a community. If I don't know, maybe I ask Eager, maybe I ask someone, right? I get some piece of code, I put it in my IDE. Better, right? Better than the text pad and not having Google, right? So that experience got improved. Speak about AI, it's again making it much more easier, right? Now you have AI, right? So as a learner, but as a learner, your question is, as a learner, right, should I use AI? What I can say from my experience looking at the AI is it actually does very good job at explaining fundamental stuff because the knowledge about fundamental stuff is there on the internet. So it is learned to some extent. Should I completely 100% use it to learn about things? No. You got to understand every line of the code. You got to understand how things are working. Like the fundamental of understanding of what this is doing, like the code wise, you should be comfortable. Like tomorrow, if I take, like for me, right, if you take this IDE, right, and give me the text editor and tell me write code, I should still be able to write some code, write and at least the pseudo code, understand the fundamentals, right? So that should be your aim, is like, of course, you'll have to use AI in your workflow. I don't think there is escape here, because if you don't use, others will use, and they'll be ahead. They'll code things faster than you as a developer. So what I would do is probably use AI to understand stuff. I understood transformers architecture using AI. You won't believe. Transformers is one of the hard thing to understand in AI, right? And I spent like watching multiple videos. I'm like, no man, I don't get it, you know. And then I read some a couple of papers here and there, read a lot of articles. I'm like, no, I don't get it, you know. And then I go to AI and I'm like, okay, explain me, you know, probably like, okay, how does transform, like, how does the, you know, the first step of the transformer happens? Comes up with an explanation. I read it. Maybe I don't understand this, and I'm like, okay, explain me in this way. I don't get it, you know. And then it's like, okay, imagine this matrix, and do this calculation. You get this. I'm like, okay, that's now making sense, right? So again, ignoring AI to understand fundamental stuff is gonna be, again, it's gonna be long journey. So you know, you think of all these as tools that you have at your disposal, but make sure that when you're working on a task, you really understand stuff, you know. And that understanding, it's very easy for me to say understand stuff. It all depends on you and your job and what you're doing, right? How you are impacting others in the community, etc. But you need to be like, you know, not blindly trusting these AI solutions too, and not you know, walk away giving a solution to your client or your customer or anybody without yourself understanding it. I think that is the danger here, you know. And that is the danger of AI. It's not that some robot is going to come and kill us and stuff like that. We need to talk about two things, in my opinion: the wellness of these systems, right? The other is um, being misusing this tool and, you know, falsely trusting it and then claiming you are an expert. You know, that's going to harm the society more than anything. So let's put it
I
this way.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree. That's one of those things. Um,
Yeah.
then I think it was a good note to let you go to do
Yeah.
the other stuff and actually go and like improve the agent force for developers for us. So
Yeah.
thank you
It's
so
all product.
much.
Yeah, it's all product team that improves it. But you know what I do is, you know, content and enablement. So I'll keep doing that. And thanks for having me, Igor.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining. See you all
Thanks
around.
everyone. See ya.